Hello, everyone. This is the Educated Conservative here, and I have, it was initially going to be one article, but it eventually turned into three that I feel like I need to discuss rather thoroughly. Now, essentially, all of these articles are from the Washington Post. You know, that unbelievably biased paper. Now, what particularly annoys me about the Washington Post is that it is not a journal, it is a newspaper, yet the things that they published are so biased. Like the New York Times, it tends to have more liberal bias, but I can deal with that, but it's just slight, similar to how the Wall Street Journal is when they do opinion pieces, it tends to be slightly conservative. But when it comes to the Washington Post, it falls off the map. So, apparently, if you want to stop online harassment, you can. It's not easy, but you can stop all of it. You can stop all online harassment. And how do you do this? You ban the men, because obviously men are the perpetrators of all online harassment. That's how you stop it. Banning the men from the internet would clearly get rid of all the harassment. It's not like females disagree with each other. It's not like females can ever, get into arguments and gossip and bicker behind each other's backs. No, if the internet was entirely composed of females, we simply wouldn't have the problems that we have today. This picture, it's just so pretentious. Just look at it. Just look at it without getting angry. It just irritates me. Look how it's just. Oh yes, the obvious solution. Look at, they're both smiling, even though the man can't use the internet. Let's just turn the internet into one giant safe space. Isn't that a brilliant idea? Because there is nothing wrong with censorship of ideas. There is nothing wrong from being exposed to things that you disagree with, nevertheless are offended to. Or I should have switched that around. But essentially, people think it's okay to live in their own little safe space, and the internet, it's like society. It's composed of everyone. The Slack channel began out of practical necessity, a place to source hair ties and Excedrin. But it wasn't long before the Washington Post's all-female chat room began to diversify into other subjects. Tampon taxes, yoga classes, the stubborn wage gap that plagues our industry. Oh my gosh, get over this stupid gender wage gap. It is completely false. I plan to do a video on it. I've been putting it off simply because it's going to take a while to gather all the sources. There are a lot of sources. It's not that I'm having trouble finding sources. It's just that there are a lot of them, and I want to be as thorough as possible so nobody can refute that how this figure of 77 cents on the dollar was arrived at completely unfairly. It's a complete myth. Now, I'm going to have a video dedicated to that. Now, right now, I'll offer a brief description of why it is invalid. They took the average that all full-time females had and divided it over the average of what all full-time males had. They did not take into account that men tend to work more hours and tend to work a lot more overtime. They did not take into account that more men are STEM majors, while more women tend to be in lower paying professions, like being an elementary school teacher. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. It's simply put, the 77 cents on the dollar figure, it isn't by discrimination, it is by personal choice. I'm going to do a whole video on it, I promise you guys. So I'm already annoyed. It's the second paragraph. It's the third well, fourth sentence, because I suppose tampon taxes and yoga classes are sentences and should be separated by periods instead of commas. But I'm just going to continue on. Get a bunch of ladies in a private listserv or Slack chat, and you'll see all sorts of conversations that you wouldn't see typically. Well, I'm not sure whether that's true. I'm sure that those are conversations that women would have among each other. So I just find it kind of ridiculous. On to the third paragraph, which I am sure is just as vapid as the first two. Communities are fundamentally different when they're just women, says Women.com founder Susan Johnson, giving a voice to a piece of old obvious wisdom that's enjoying something of a renaissance online. The cadence is different. The tone is more trusting. It's this safe environment where everyone can express herself without being trolled all the time. Now, this annoys me for a different reason. Communities are fundamentally different when they are just women. Okay, yes, fair enough. That's stating the obvious. The cadence is different. The tone is more trusting. It's the safe environment where everyone can express herself without being trolled all the time. Now, that can either imply two things. That A, the majority of males are trolls, or B, that the males who are trolls simply dominate all of the threads, which I just simply doubt, because that would be a minority just spending and devoting all of their time to making these women's lives miserable, which I have no doubt feminists do believe. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they believe that. This is just absurd on so many levels. So, you know what? Okay, all right. I guess feminists are incapable of being of attacking anyone or being disruptive or trolling. You know what? Maybe let me just check whether feminists have attacked or assaulted anyone. Just give me a short second here. You guys won't believe what I found. You just won't believe it. I mean, I thought it was impossible, but I just typed in, feminist attack men, just a feminist attack, and this came up. It's not online, but I think it's a bit aggressive. You know what? Why don't we watch the video together? Apparently the audio isn't working. Oh, there we go. This is savagery of the highest degree. If running around topless isn't trolling, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to describe what this is other than vandalism and trolling. I'll link the video for you guys. I'll link the entire article. I'm not going to bother reading any of it. I just wanted to show that women can be aggressive. I mean, just look at this. Oh yes, clearly. Oh, that poor man. It's just, they're defending a cathedral. Just look at them. They're just poking him, pushing him around. Look, he's just standing there. This is just sad. She just spat at the man. So, I'm gonna stop this. This is disgusting. This is absolutely revolting. I don't know how else to describe it. You have a whole bunch of women attacking men in real life, and here we have this and she's getting upset over being trolled. Oh, boo friggin' who? Show me the casualties. Show me the body count. It's just absurd. So I've just scrolled down to the next two paragraphs. Men who harass women online are quite literally losers, new study finds. Yes, I'm sure that this study is scientific and is filled with insight, just like this article. This is just absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to do this article, the one that shows that men who harass women online are losers. I'm gonna go on to that after I finish this one, because I was originally gonna do it right now, but it would just take too much time. Private women's forums are, to be clear, as old as the internet itself. Yes, I'm sure. But they seem... Okay, first of all, I'm sorry to interrupt here. The internet was created originally as a military construction, and the internet has been around since the 1960s. No, they have not been around since the military was around. I highly doubt that military women were all like, hey, let's create a safe space for each other. That's just ridiculous. I'm sure that military women have their lives filled with purpose, unlike you idiots. So back to the article. But they seem to have proliferated in the past 2 years, helped along by the rise of messaging apps and growing awareness of both privacy and gender-based online harassment. Now, I'm going to say something that might surprise you guys, and I mean my viewers. I have absolutely no problems with women creating their own little community. That's absolutely fine. There are just two things that irritate me a little bit. If men were to do this, if we were to create a men's-only community, we would instantly receive a large amount of hate for being sexist, which apparently women aren't capable of being. Secondly, I have a problem when people think that their little community is what the whole world looks like. It's one thing to create a community that you want to be a part of, but when you act like that's how the entire world should be, that is simply wrong. What you have just done is you have created a little safe space, and now you're trying to extend it over other people. And essentially what that does is that in order for you to feel safe around other people, you have to oppress, and I do mean oppress those other people. So that's one of the problems with feminism. Essentially, you're trying to make the entire world into a safe space, which just isn't feasible. It's also morally wrong. It's unethical, and I don't think I'm using circular logic here, because you're using, well, I want to feel safe as a justify for censoring people. And there's a lot of things that can make people feel unsafe that are trivial. Offense isn't given. You don't offend somebody, you're offended, if that makes sense. And I know that there's some semantic ambiguity there, but it isn't. If somebody's offended easily, that isn't the person who said the comment's fault. Now, I've said this quite a few times, but just to reemphasize, censoring free speech is never the answer. So the article goes on about troll-free communities, because once again, women apparently cannot troll. The past 2 years have seen a proliferation of invite-only listservs, private Slack channels, closed Facebook groups with names like Girls Night Out, Female Founders, and No Boys Allowed. I wonder, and I'm just curious, I wonder what would happen if we created Facebook names like Good Old Boys and No Women Allowed. We would inevitably get flack for that, which annoys me. I think that that it is a right of people to associate with who they want to associate. That is fine, but for whatever reason, when men want to simply be around other men, that is sexist notion. Because of their private nature, it's hard to come by the exact number of these groups, but evidence suggests there are thousands. I love how they say evidence suggests and then do not put any evidence. This is the one thing that irritates me about certain journals And about certain newspapers, they make an assertion and they expect you to simply believe it. They make empty claims, and it quite frankly drives me crazy. You'll notice that for most of the stuff that I say, I put evidence for it. The one thing, and I've been meaning to do a giant video on this, is the gender pay gap. I need to spend the time to do a video on that. But I do not make blind claims. But yet, I don't know why this is acceptable in the media. It's okay to make blind claims now. I don't know why, but that's kind of getting off topic. So I'm going to get back on topic. So exact number of these groups, thousands, and regardless of each of these groups' exact size or platform, they share a common mission: to give women a refuge where they can talk about tampons or wage gaps, which don't exist. I mean, wage gaps, tampons do exist, just because I'm losing faith in humanity right now, or whatever else, without raising male eyebrows or drawing harassment. Yes, because men are looking at you when you do that kind of stuff. They go, oh wait, do I get to harass somebody? Oh boy, that is what we wait for. Also, I'm sure that if you wanted to talk about the gender wage gap and somebody said it is completely false, you would go, no, it isn't. It's a part of. I feel safer knowing that there's a wage gap, because that way I can pretend to be discriminated against. I can pretend to not be privileged. It's just absurd. The article goes on to say, it is exhausting being attacked for having any opinion or being cross-examined about a personal experience. This is so ironic. And the reason why it's ironic is because whenever somebody cross-examines feminism or what the SJW believes in, it's immediately met with criticism. It's immediately, oh, well, you don't believe in this? You're a racist. It's just, no, I don't believe that racism is as prevalent as you say it is, and there's nothing wrong with that. Host of Girl on Girl. It's like a breath of fresh air to be able to talk about these things without worrying or expecting hostile comments. Okay, so you have to realize what you're doing here. When you discuss things within these, I can't call them discourse communities, because discourse communities would imply that they are somewhat educated. They are educated about these topics that they talk about. I would use the word indoctrinated instead. But essentially, you have to acknowledge when you're doing this, you're not being critical. You're not being open about you're being rather closed off. It's a very limited viewpoint. So this article just kind of goes on from here. I'll leave it in the description so that when you read it, you can decide whether I'm being uncritical or not by skipping the rest of it. Honestly, this is just getting exhausting. It's essentially, there's an assertion no evidence is given, or it's weak evidence, and yet I am the one who has to defend it. I think Christopher Hitchens said something along the lines of, I have no need to refute something for which no evidence is given to support it, or something along those lines. I'm sorry, I am paraphrasing very broadly there, so I apologize for that, but essentially it is relevant in this case because there are plenty of assertions being made and no evidence being given. So apparently men who harass women online are literally losers. I think what they did is that they took a game and by literally losers they mean they don't do well in video games, I suppose. And I'm just going to show you the article, okay, rather than just trying to paraphrase. So I'm just going to show you the data rather than reading the article's evaluation of the data, because guess what? They're not going to do it properly. So a chart from the Halo study shows that how nice gamers were to other males, dotted line, I think you mean dashed, and females, solid line, during gameplay. Men always treated each other the same, But the better a player gets, the more likely he is to be nice to ladies. So bravo! Do you know what they have just shown? They have shown that men who spend more time in video games or are better at video games are more nice to women, which would imply that the men who are not good at video games, or the so-called losers who actually have a life, go out, who have a job, who actually go outside and socialize, they are not as nice to women. Gee, I wonder why this is. It's not like these sex-depraved video game addicts would have any motive to be overly nice to women. No, that would be completely absurd. So essentially, this article shows the opposite of what they wanted to show. You've got to love that. Yes, they are literally losers in video games, but in general, if somebody is sinking that many hours into a video game, they don't have a life. Hopefully you guys understand my train of thought, and that is the people who are not as good as video games, who have lower skill levels, who are not as nice to women, have real lives. Isn't that amazing to think about? So while reading this article, I found a third article, which I just felt the need to open. It feels like clickbait. Just read it. The only guide to Gamergate you'll ever need to read. Yes, I'm just gonna take a very liberal interpretation, or what I imagine is a liberal interpretation of Gamergate, and treat it as a sacred document. Just treat it as the lord of some deity. Oh dear. That is all I can say. That's a picture of Anita Sarkeesian, for those of you who do not know who that woman is. This article is from 2014, by the way. But it is going to be biased. I just think we should take a look at it. Just call me crazy. Now, I'll be honest. I'm not a complete expert on Gamergate. I've read about what's happened with Zoe Quinn and a few other feminists, and I don't want to be guilty of a fallacy called poisoning the well, which is essentially where I distort your view of Gamergate. But what I can tell you is that my impression seems to be that it is about journalistic integrity in games. That's all like I can feel I say about Gamergate. So why don't we read their description about Gamergate? So what is Gamergate? Whatever Gamergate may have started as, it is now an internet culture war. Okay, alright, that's fair. On the one side are independent game makers and critics, many of them who are women, who advocate for greater inclusion in gaming. Okay, alright. And on the other side of the equation are a motley alliance of vitriolic naysayers, misogynists, anti-feminists, trolls, people convinced they're being manipulated by the left-leaning and corrupt press, and traditionalists who just don't want games to change. Now, one of the issues about the left side Gamergate movement is that many of them are not gamers. So I remember once they, and I'm calling this from memory, I'll try to find it and put it in the sources. Forgive me if I don't. They essentially had a spread of different age groups and gender people and genders of sex. So they had an age range, and then they had males and females, and they would have the different kinds of games that they would play. And essentially the large part of the video game industry that mainly does competitive gaming or story-driven gaming, which is the majority of games, those are driven by men, while women were more likely to play Candy Crush and Tetris and things like those. So essentially what you have is you have a whole bunch of feminists saying that the video game industry is sexist because women are not a part of the target audience, which I think is fair because companies are out to make money. They're not out there to be politically correct. Oh goody, look what I found. I was worried. I actually wasn't going to find this chart. It took me 30 minutes, but I didn't want to be accused of making a blind assertion. So as we can see, older men tend to play casino poker. It's actually closer towards the neutral side, so some women as well. But look at the spread for young males: card battle, strategy, shooter, racing, action, RPG. Let's take a look at the young female side: endless runner, arcade, simulation, brain quiz, match 3, bubble shooter, social, turn-based. That's kind of getting up there. You see how a game like Halo, Call of Duty, Fallout, they would tend to cater towards men. And essentially the problem with Gamergate is you have a whole bunch of women who aren't even interested in games. They're just more of interested in inclusion, and they're trying to change this industry. It is literally an attack from an outside source. Now, I'm not really qualified to talk about what prompted Gamergate. Once again, I really don't know. But I can kind of tell you what seems to be going on now. And I do know that Anita Sarkeesian, one of the major Gamergate spokespersons on the left side, spokeswoman, I suppose, she does not even play games herself. She is not a gamer. So, once again, I didn't want to be accused of making a blind claim. So I found this video on the internet, so I'm going to play it for you guys. I won't put it, you know what, I will put it in the sources just to be thorough, to give credit of the person who had it up there. I wasn't going to, because I'm just going to play the whole 44-second clip. But here you are.
I'm going to show you a remix that I just finished this weekend and no one else has seen. One person has seen it. It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
There's too many dicks on the dance floor!
Too many dicks on the dance floor. Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Too many dicks.
To me, the song is positive just because I've only contextualized it in a way to critique male domination in our media. And also video games. Like, I would love to play video games, but I don't want to go around shooting people and ripping off their heads, and it's just gross. So hence this is my response.
I think that's enough. That's where the video ends. This is supposed to be academic. There is a song playing in the background saying there are too many. I'm not going to say it out loud because I'd like to say that I have higher standards than Anita Sarkeesian. But, I mean, come on. That is hardly academic. Hopefully you all realize how absurd this is. She is not a gamer herself. So, I think I've been more than fair in my evaluation of the Washington Post, and I'll list all of the sources and the data with their links so that you can take a look at them and see whether I am being fair and critical or not. I think I have been. Now, you'll notice that I do not bring up evidence when I refute my opponent's arguments when they make blind assertions. I feel like that would be too much time and effort for me to do. So, the blind assertions that the Washington Post makes, like I mentioned earlier, they blindly assert the amount of feminist-only groups or female-only groups. Things like that irritate me. Anyway, getting back to our discussion of Gamergate, you'll notice that essentially the problem is not misogyny. The problem is the fact that there are a whole bunch of gamers who essentially enjoy their community, and you have this external group of feminists trying to infringe upon it. And I don't think I've seen anything like this before. I think Gamergate is a pretty unique example. You have a group of people, and you have another group just completely trying to change it from the outside, not by infiltrating it, but just from the outside. They're trying to say, oh, you need to have more women, you need to do this, you need to do this, this, and this. And the left group of Gamergate will never be satisfied. They're not even gamers. It's like they're doing this purely because they want that control. They want to be able to completely change a group. And there is an irony here. And that irony is that these feminists, they have their own little group that nobody else can get into, which is fine. That's an American right. If they only want to associate with each other, they can do that. But a group of gamers has the same right to do that too. They have that right. And feminists are trying to infringe upon it. When they do it, it's absolutely okay. It's just some kind of unbelievable hypocrisy. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you've learned something. I sure did, and I enjoyed making this too. I need to work on that gender pay gap video, so I will do that. Anyways, I'm just irritated, and the reason why I'm just trying to think about this is it's just so irritating, just reading all of these articles that just make these assertions that assume that they're in the right. It's just, oh, well, I am justified because I know I am justified. It is completely wrong. Anyway, I've worked really hard on this, so I hope you guys get something out of it.